Now, we're going to go over to the Senate side, get a little bit different perspective. We're going to be joined by Senator Mark Warner. He's Democrat from Virginia, and Louisiana Republican David Vitter. Before we begin, however, here's what Secretary Geithner told our own Steve Leisman about the debt ceiling. Please take a listen.
Does Treasury have a plan for the failure to raise the debt ceiling? Do you have a triage plan of who will get paid? Will the creditors get paid first?
Our plan has been, and it's the only plan available, is for Congress to act, and that's why Congress is going to act again, because they've looked at it too. We've all looked at it. We've looked at all the feasible options, and they recognize that.
So there is no plan? There is no backup plan for when the debt ceiling isn't raised?
No, their plan and our plan is for Congress to raise the debt limit.
All right, Senator Warner, is he right? Is the only plan on the table to raise the debt ceiling is that there is no triage plan, there is no backup plan? What do you think, Senator Warner?
Well, Larry, I just got to tell you, even if there is a backup plan, why would we roll the dice on that? Why would we take the chance that we might see an interest rate spike? Every point that we add to interest rates over a 10-year period just to the national debt adds $1 trillion. Why would we allow the failure of the political leadership and our political institutions to put us, into that kind of no man's land? Let's do what we're supposed to do, but let's also recognize, and I was just listening to your two previous guests, and I'm kind of arguing back, screaming at each other, a little less volume and a little more, let's figure out how we get a $4 trillion plan that's balanced to take that off, drive that debt to GDP ratio into livable range, recognize it's probably got to be in that ratio of 3-to-1 cuts over revenues, put everything on the table and stop arguing about this stuff, or at least argue in a way where we get to a result rather than he said and blame each other.
Well, he said, she said, it's so much fun. I guess that's the deal, but I appreciate your thoughts, Senator. Senator Vitter, welcome back.
Thanks, Larry.
Senator Warner mentioned the magic number of $4 trillion. The reason why I say that's a magic number, the issue before us is not only to raise the debt ceiling,
right,
but it is also to stop a downgrade from AAA to AA or worse by the ratings agencies, Moody's and S&P. And they are stipulating that $4 trillion over 10 years is the number, as Senator Warner suggested. Can we get it, Mr. Vitter?
If we focus on the right things, we said. But Larry, let's restate what you just said, because I think it's crucially important. Raising the debt ceiling on or before August 2nd isn't good enough. And Moody's and Standard & Poor's are the first to say that. We need to do that, and we need to have a credible plan to deal with the real problem, which isn't the debt ceiling, but it's spending and debt. And I agree that $4 trillion is the minimum figure. We need to do both of those things. I don't think there's a chance in the world the debt ceiling won't be raised. Unfortunately, I think there's a huge chance we're just going to kick the can down the road and not deal with the underlying issue of spending and debt.
Well, Senator Warner, I can get from news accounts and my own reporting and conversations with people, $4 trillion is out there. The president himself has been talking about $4 trillion. And I'm kind of rethinking my own view, because the president has put cost of living adjustments on the table for Social Security. That's not nothing. He has put retirement age for Medicare. That's not nothing. There are Medicare cuts, contrary to what we heard in the first segment. That's not nothing. Why not $4 trillion, and let's work out a tax deal? Maybe put in the repatriation of foreign-based corporate earnings, for example. Turn it into a pro-growth package. In other words, is there more here than meets the eye? I'm turning from cynic to more positive on this.
Well, I'm glad, Larry, because there have been some days I've been pulling out my hair in the last couple of weeks.
No, I hear
because let's also realize that if we see a debt downgrade, that is a tax increase on every American.
Right.
Whatever you want to call it, it is a tax increase on every American, on every business, on every family, on the cost of operations. It is craziness. So I think, we're looking what the gang of 6 or gang of 5, or, and tomorrow we're going to share ideas with others, something that does say, let's look at a balanced approach. We got to make these entitlement programs sustainable. We've got to cut back on defense spending, domestic discretionary spending. And I do believe, frankly, under the old Ronald Reagan approach, that we can cut tax rates and end up increasing revenues if we're willing to take out a lot more than just the tax expenditures that have been talked about, but really use the Simpson-Bowles plan. It isn't perfect, but there's been 4 different commissions. They've all kind of come out plus or minus around that framework.
Larry, I think the key is this. We need a revenue component, but saying that is a lot different from saying we're going to jack up taxes and increase taxes. We need more revenue through tax reform, simplification, and growth.
Well, I think
we don't need more revenue by just jacking up operate.
I mean, I think one of the problems here, frankly, is President Obama is a lousy negotiator. I think he's a terrible negotiator, full of inflammatory statements, which is not helping anybody. Senator Vitter, let me ask you this. Nobody wants to raise taxes, least of all me. You probably don't. I don't think Mr. Warner wants to raise taxes. But if you had a revenue-neutral component, let's say you took away some small deductions. This is before we get to Grand Slam reform, which I agree with. But if you had some deductions out, but you gave a tax holiday for the repatriation of the foreign earnings of American companies, that could put $1 trillion into the U.S. economy. Wouldn't that work in this deal?
Absolutely, Larry. The answer is yes. We need a revenue-neutral component that adds to growth and therefore over time grows revenue. And in terms of a grand deal, we need that sort of fundamental tax reform that gets rid of a lot of deductions, credits, exemptions to lower rates for everybody. I would point out, though, that's not what the president demanded in these negotiations. What he demanded was decoupling of rates so that rates go up for the top tier, and that's very anti-growth. Well, wouldn't even get us to deficit reduction.
Trouble is, Senator Warner, like I say, I hate to be disrespectful. It's not my way, but I don't think Mr. Obama is doing a very good job negotiating. And I think there's so much on the table that you can get your $4 trillion, you can get your revenue neutral, you can get your repatriation of foreign profits from American companies, and we can be done with this and get out and grow the economy instead of wasting everybody's time. Because you're right about Simpson Bowles and whatever. I'll give you the last word.
Larry, I just say this. Listen, I believe repatriation ought to be part of the mix. I've already voted for it when it was on the floor of the Senate. I don't think you can put this arbitrary revenue neutral. I think some of the revenues that are going to be raised ought to go towards deficit reduction and rate reduction. But there are ways, as you well know, Larry, that we kind of game the system. The alternative minimum tax. If we did true tax reform, you could phase out the alternative minimum tax, and that's $1.7 trillion tax reduction based on CBO scoring. There's a reasonable way, if people are willing to compromise, to get this done.
I know you're right. I know you're both right. I know that these basic reforms are necessary. I'm just trying to get through the next couple of weeks until we do the long-range reforms. Senator
Amen.
Mark Warner, you're terrific. David Vitter, equally terrific.
Larry.
You're both terrific. Thanks for helping us on the show. By the way,